Camille Fairborn from Utah State University, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Cause Teaching and Learning webinar. We're pleased to have as our presenter today Dr. Ann Edwards, who is a Senior Associate and Director of Learning and Teaching Carnegie Math Pathways at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advanced. Her topic today is Statway, Results and Lessons Learned. The way the webinars work is that all listeners are muted during the webinar. You can ask questions at any time by typing them into the questions box, and we'll be sure to ask those questions towards the end and give Ann a chance to respond. You can also use the chat box if you are having any technical questions, and I can respond to those. At this point then, I'll turn things over to Dr. Ann Edwards. Ann, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ann Edwards. Very happy to be speaking with you today. Today I'm going to give you an overview of what Statway is and our theory of action with respect to Statway as a systemic reform effort. And that theory of action reflects some of the lessons that we've learned, so we'll be touching upon that along the way. And then I'm going to spend hopefully a fair amount of time sharing with you our latest results. And as was mentioned, I'm going to be taking questions at the end. So off we go. Nope, that didn't work. Here we go. Okay. So really quickly, the larger context of the work that we've done in the Carnegie Math Pathways is to address what we consider, and I know all of you understand, to be a major national problem. And that has to do with the extremely poor achievement outcomes and learning outcomes of students, in particular those who place into developmental mathematics. This particular slide speaks to community college students in particular, but just to give you a sense of the scope of the issue, about half of the post-secondary students in the United States are enrolled at community colleges, and about 60 to 70% of those students at placement need at least one developmental math course before they're allowed to enroll in college credit courses. However, about 80% of those students don't get out or complete their developmental math pathway within about 3 years. And people have done analyses further out, and that pretty much caps out. That amounts to about 500,000 students per cohort. That's a huge number of students who, because of the developmental math sequence, are stopped in their attempts to attain their 2-year or 4-year goals, and therefore move on to further education and careers. And this, this is not a terribly new story for all of us, but we at the Carnegie Foundation several years ago thought that we would try a new approach. New, and you'll see this, new, not all the components necessarily for this audience are going to seem all that new. I'm just going to say that out front. But I think what we offer is a sort of systemic, comprehensive approach that I'd like to share with you. Okay. So our efforts in this are part of a larger national effort. What this slide represents are the core principles that were presented in November 2015 by a joint statement of ATD, AACC, the Dana Center, Complete College America, the Education Commission of the States, and also Jobs for the Future. And these guiding principles speak to comprehensive reform of remedial education to ensure student success. And I'm not going to go through these very carefully, or very closely right now, but what I want to just show you is that the field nationally is really moving toward thinking carefully about placement and about guided pathways, about academic and non-academic supports in conjunction with those pathways, rigorous streamlined remediation options, and as well consideration of supports along the way to college credential or degree. And we believe that we fit squarely within these 6 core principles. So, I apologize, I don't know how to turn that off. So this represents basically our theory of action, and as you can see, it's a pretty complex set of change ideas that we combined together. So I want to underscore here that Statway is more than just a curriculum. It's really a systemic reform effort designed to both accelerate as well as improve the quality of the learning experience for students who place into Dev Math. And of course, Statway is focused on college-level statistics. This area of action reflects what we have learned about the components and features of effective math pathways. It includes attention to course structure and sequence, which I'll speak to in just a second, innovative curriculum and pedagogy, socio-emotional and language and literacy supports for students, as well as comprehensive professional development. Finally, we are a network, and therefore we work together in order to learn and share our learnings across the network. We're a network of faculty and administrators across 58 institutions. I won't have time to go too deeply into all of these components today, but please feel free to ask me questions at the end of the talk or email me later to get further details. And at the last slide, I'm going to show you a website address that has a lot more information about each of these components and our latest reports. Okay. So this slide shows sort of our model of the accelerated approach to statistics learning that we take. And this slide, of course, shows both Statway and Quantway. Quantway is our quantitative reasoning course sequence, but today, of course, I'm talking about Statway. So our accelerated approach to statistics helps students get to and through their math credit in less time than the traditional sequence. As you know, a traditional sequence for students who place into developmental mathematics can be, as this shows, 3 semesters to complete college math, but in some cases it can be 4 semesters or even 5 semesters. What Statway does is it reduces the time to a single year. Also, the design is based on a cohort structure, meaning that we expect that the students and their instructors stay together for the whole year. And based on our analyses of the institutions in our network, we have learned, and this is one of our big lessons learned, that outcomes are significantly improved when this particular aspect of the Statway design is implemented. And you can imagine for a lot of institutions, this is a bit of a logistical challenge to keep the students together across a whole year. But we do have different cases of different kinds of implementations of this across our 58 institutions, and it's quite clear that keeping students together through this kind of intensive experience that, as you'll learn later, also heavily emphasizes issues of social belonging and persistence is very, very helpful. A quick note on the kind of student that the Pathways is ideally designed for. Because of the specific curricular and pedagogical designs, the Pathways in Statway are particularly good for students who previously did not succeed in elementary algebra or intermediate algebra, who may be math phobic, who may have had really difficult, problematic previous relationships and experiences in mathematics. A student who wants to earn math credit as quickly as possible, but as we know, we always want them to maximize and optimize the quality of the learning, even if they're going to do that in an accelerated fashion. And also a student who plans to transfer to earn a BA, typically in a degree program that does not require calculus. Or a student who plans to earn an Associate of Arts degree at a 2-year institution with the possibility of continuing on later to a 4-year degree. I want to just highlight here the orange bar. The orange bar represents our new bridge courseware. This is a STEM bridge, and these course materials were designed by a consortium of institutions within our network, and what they did is they investigated what the prerequisite algebraic skills and understandings are for students entering into pre-calculus across the United States. They sort of did a consensus look over many, many states and came to a series of learning outcomes that addresses those algebra topics. And so the bridge courseware is designed to be flexible curriculum materials that can be used in co-rec or as a booster or as a kind of other arrangement, depending on how it is that the particular institution wants to use it, that takes students who are in Statway and prepares them to enter into pre-calculus. The thing about the bridge courseware, of course, is that it is designed with the same instructional design principles and pedagogical principles as Statway itself. We have found that several of our member schools have tested an even more accelerated model of Statway and Quantway, and that they're still achieving very strong success rates. And this slide represents basically what they're taking Statway from a single year down to a single term. Some of our schools have even done it as a single intensive quarter, or 2 quarters if they're on a quarter system. This aligns with research more broadly that shows that students in developmental mathematics have been more successful within accelerated co-rec models over 1 term than traditional sequence. More and more of our institutions are moving this way. Okay, so I'm going to go briefly into our instructional system. As I've mentioned, the Pathways approach is a systemic reform effort, and of course, the curriculum and pedagogy of Statway are central to this system. The curriculum and pedagogy are designed based on what we call the learning opportunities, which are core principles of learning derived from research in a number of different fields: cognitive science, educational psychology, and mathematics teaching and learning, among others. The learning opportunities are productive struggle, which means that students must be given opportunities within class and in their homework to engage productively with rich, challenging tasks that are just beyond their current capacities or current abilities. And the second is explicit connections. Explicit connections refers to giving students opportunities to make explicit the conceptual, procedural, and situational relationships that a mathematical task might offer and a mathematical lesson might offer. So, for example, the ways that we support explicit connections in the lesson are making very clear how particular situations, mathematical situations or statistical situations in this lesson connect to what they might have done before and foreshadow what they're going to do in the future in terms of the statistical reasoning and the big ideas. And then lastly, we have deliberate practice. Deliberate practice refers to, of course, the importance of practice in mastery in mathematics and statistics, but doing so in a way that allows students to stretch and build on the work that they've done in the class, not just repeat over and over again the kind of drill and kill that one might typically see. In Statway, this often looks like further elaboration and deepening of the particular context that the lesson offered, exploring and probing the particular reasoning that or ideas that were raised in the lesson that both allow students to further deepen their understanding of what it was, but then also bridge to what is happening in the next lesson. Okay, so the learning opportunities sort of are at the base of the design of the curriculum as well as the design of the pedagogy. So just a little bit more about the curriculum. Statway aims for ambitious statistics learning goals, of course college-level statistics, that emphasize conceptual understanding and the ability to apply skills in a variety of authentic contexts. The curriculum materials themselves are designed around problem situations that are authentic and relevant to students. We, of course, use real data. Those lesson contexts are updated on a regular basis. As I'll say more later, we are actually a network of faculty and administration, and the faculty themselves work to find and update those lesson contexts on a continuous basis and find new sources of data to enrich the lessons. The student learning outcomes for Statway were established and vetted by a group of national experts and professional societies in the discipline, including AMATIC, American Statistical Association, and MAA. And of course, now we are currently undergoing a review of the alignment of our curriculum, revision of our curriculum against the new GAZE report. Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into the actual learning outcomes for Statway. These Statway students begin with college-level statistics on day one. That's an important thing to note. This is not a year-long course that begins with sort of accelerated developmental mathematics and then does college-level statistics. It really is an integrated college-level statistics course supported by developmental math learning outcomes. That also, in addition to the mathematics and statistics learning outcomes, have several sort of broad objectives having to do with students' mathematical practices is one way to think about it. And I've listed them here. I'm not going to go into them except for just to highlight that communication using the language of mathematics is really important. And of course, all the different kinds of aspects of fluency and proficiency with respect to mathematical thinking, as well as productive disposition, are central. The notion of discovery and inquiry is, and problem solving is a central aspect of what we're trying to achieve. And of course, being able to use mental strategies fluently as well as technology accurately and appropriately is throughout the curriculum and pedagogy. Okay, so as I mentioned, Statway, both mathematics learning outcomes and statistics learning outcomes. The mathematics learning outcomes fall into four major buckets: numeracy, proportional reasoning, algebraic reasoning, functions and modeling. And to best serve the diverse group of math learners, of course, that we have in our courses, the mathematics component of Statway focuses instruction on assessment on key concepts attending to each of these buckets that support statistical thinking and data analysis. So these are not sort of add-on topics that sort of are quite separate from the major learning outcomes for the college-level statistics content. These are offered and integrated into the curriculum to serve the statistical thinking and data analysis work. And the statistics learning outcomes for Statway are, broadly speaking, are that students will understand that data analysis is a process that begins with a formulation of a question that can be addressed with appropriate data, and then followed by a development of a thoughtful plan for identifying and collecting the necessary data. And of course, this is what the course begins with. Students will then also learn how data can be displayed and summarized in informative ways, and they will learn how the data can be used to draw conclusions in the presence of uncertainty. The specifics of this would be far too much to put in a slideshow, but the website that I'm going to show you at the end of this, at the end of the presentation, has, of course, links to the full set of the table of contents and the detailed learning outcomes for Statway. Suffice it to say that across the 15 states that are in our network, the Statway learning outcomes, meaning the college-level statistics learning outcomes that are in Statway, well meet the specific college-level statistics requirements within those states, with some modifications in a few cases. So for example, for California, we have made additional ANOVA lessons, I believe, in order to meet the specific California requirements. But in order to address those different modifications or requirements across the different states, we do have a set of alternate and supplemental course materials. Okay. So that's the curriculum. The pedagogy is research-based and student-centered, and we really emphasize collaborative learning and mathematical instructional practices that really support long-lasting, deep understanding of the mathematics. Some of the key features are that the pedagogy creates opportunities for students to engage in mathematical reasoning with one another and share and compare their mathematical reasoning. In order to do so, there's a real emphasis on eliciting student thinking and building upon students' ideas toward the specific mathematics and statistical learning goals of that lesson. The pedagogy also best leverages and optimizes the problem-focused nature of the curriculum materials by engaging students in those rich and relevant tasks in ways that invite mathematical sense-making. So there's a really strong emphasis both in the curriculum materials and the ways that we support instructors to use those materials, that the name of the game here is really making sense of the mathematics and using and learning about the statistical and mathematical tools in order to be able to make sense of the mathematical and statistical situations being offered. And then finally, a really strong emphasis on collaborative learning and active learning approaches. These support students' engagement, we have found, productive struggle, and of course, developing their communication. And especially, we have found that collab learning is critical to supporting students' sense of social belonging and therefore their productive persistence within the classroom. Because as you know, one of the major challenges of students, in particular the population we work with, is there sort of sense of not belonging? Is there uncertainty about whether or not they are able to learn the mathematics and able to achieve in this context? So we are explicit about the ways in which we support, both in the curriculum and the pedagogy, instructors to be able to reach students along those lines. And I'll be talking a lot more about that later. And now I'm going to be talking about that. So the set of considerations in the curriculum and pedagogy that speak to what I was just talking about, or in other words, the sort of socio-emotional factors that impact students' persistence, engagement, and achievement, is we call productive persistence. And what these really are concretely are evidence-based supports for promoting students' productive persistence that are integrated throughout the instructional system that increase student motivation, tenacity, and skills for success. Productive persistence we define as tenacity plus good strategies. We have done a lot of work with some of the leading researchers in social psychology in order to identify those key ideas within productive persistence that are most applicable and are the biggest bang for the buck, basically, for this student population in this mathematical context. And these are listed here. The top, that students believe that they are capable of learning math, refers to the notion of growth mindset. The second, the purple, refers to the student's sense of social belonging. So we want students to feel that they are socially tied to their peers, to their instructors, and of course to the course more broadly. Third, we address this idea that we want students to believe that the course itself has value to them, both instrumental value as well as a deeper sense of value in terms of the impact on their own lives. And then students have skills, habits, and know-how to succeed in a college setting. Of course, this is sort of typically known as sort of academic skills. And then lastly, in brown, importantly, it is not just about changing students it's not just about expecting students to change. We feel just as important as the changes to students are the changes to faculty and colleges that we need to support in order to help students shift their skills and mindsets to be more positive in terms of productive persistence. The ways that this actually manifests in the Statway curriculum pedagogy are through basically two what we call packages. The first is starting strong, and that's a package of routines and interventions that are undertaken during the first 4 weeks of class and are embedded into the curriculum and pedagogy. Those staying strong routines and interventions are designed to give students a real boost in these areas of mindset, social belonging, value, also math anxiety, and academic skills right at the very start of the class. We have data consistently that suggests that these kinds of interventions are most effective when done right at the beginning of the class. So students don't, in part because students then don't start down the road of disengagement that feeds upon itself when we are able to sort of stop that early on. The second package that we offer now is called Staying Strong. We, in our analyses, have found that students' productive persistence, even if the starting strong package was effective, starts to lag near the sort of second half of the course. So we developed a package of staying strong routines to help instructors to develop ways to continue to maintain and improve their students' productive persistence. As I mentioned, we actually measure students' productive persistence along these constructs at several time points in the term, at the start, after the first month, and then again at the end. We provide reports to faculty about their students' productive persistent survey responses, and then really importantly, we also then tie professional development resources to support instructors to be able to take action based on those data in their student survey reports. Okay, how am I doing on time? What time is it? Oh, I'm getting there. Okay, so the language and literacy supports is a second kind of supports for students that are embedded within the instructional materials and classroom practice. This ranges in a couple of different ways from actual text that has been revised and rewritten by language and literacy experts in order to reduce barriers to comprehension, as well as professional development resources specifically on the research and best practices supporting this population of students in these areas, statistics. And then we also have a set of alternate lessons that have specific explicit scaffolds and practices built into them that support comprehension and mathematical problem solving. I'm trying to speed up here. Okay, and all of the instructional system that I described, the curriculum, the pedagogy, productive persistence, and language and literacy supports sit within a larger set of a larger system that is designed to support instructors and admin to be able to effectively implement these courses. That includes a comprehensive faculty development system, faculty professional development system. It's called Advancing Quality Teaching here in the yellow. We also have network learning community, of faculty engaged in instructional improvement, and network resources and collaboration that support institutions to effectively launch, maintain, and scale Statway. And of course, all of that sits within a larger network of folks that are engaged together with common learning goals using a common data infrastructure that allows us to be able to engage collaboratively in sort of continuous improvement of all of these elements of the instructional system. Okay. All right, so I am going to move on to results. So that provides you an overview of what it is that Statway is and some of the things that we think are really important about doing Statway in order to be effective. And I'm going to show you now several different kinds of analyses that we've done recently that tell us about basically how we're doing. So this first slide is basically a sort of a descriptive level result, looking at time to complete college level math courses, Statway versus the traditional sequence. So if we look across the top here, what this represents is nationally on average, students who begin in the developmental math traditional sequence, about 6% of them complete college level mathematics within a year. And that goes up to about 15% of them within 2 years. By contrast, Statway students succeed within a year at about a rate of 48%. So what we say is, on average, we have tripled the success rate in half the time. But these are broad brush results. What we wanted to do is take a closer look, a more apples to apples comparison. And so what we undertook was a propensity score matching analysis. For every student in Statway, we matched them against 5 other students at their own institutions along 44 dimensions and looked at their outcomes comparatively. And what this shows you is Statway students' success rate, which means C or higher, within 2 terms, as compared to their matched peers' success rate within 2 years. So it's an apples to apples comparison in terms of students, but the matched students here are given basically 2 years to complete as opposed to the Statway of 2 terms. And you can see that the Statway students dramatically outperform their matched peers in ways similar to the descriptive results before. A real quick note, the asterisk under 2015-16 refers to the fact that these data are very, very new, and these are just preliminary. But the trend looks about right. The next slide is it's the same analysis, but what we did is we took out one college. And the reason why we did this, that particular college is the one that really struggles to implement all elements of the design. And the one element of the design that that is particularly challenging for them to implement is the cohort. And earlier I talked about the fact that we have found across analyses that in our network that the cohort-based model seems to really be an important factor in improving outcomes for students. And this is just one of the analysis that points to that. So if we take out that one college, we can see that the propensity score matching analysis really shows that the rates are even higher. Oh, by the way, the light blue line that's creeping up across the graph here is actually our enrollment, and that's on the vertical axis on the right. So what that shows clearly then is these success rates maintain even as Statway scales across the country. The propensity score matching analysis also allowed us to look closely at subgroups. And what we see here is that Statway is producing positive results among all subgroups. And we think that means that we're beginning to provide greater equity in math completion. Traditionally underserved students are disproportionately likely to encounter developmental math as a stumbling block on the road to college completion. And of course, the community college student population is more racially diverse and older, lower income than four-year university students. And minority students are placed in more developmental math courses and less likely to complete these courses than white students. And so given that whole context, the fact that the subgroups are sort of doing so much dramatically better in many cases really is evidence to us that we are beginning to provide greater equity. The next thing I want to show you is a preliminary analysis on post-Statway college credit accumulation. And again, this is preliminary. I think you might be the first folks who are actually looking at this. Statway students accumulate comparable, if not more, college-level units in the subsequent calendar year than non-Statway students. So this is college-level units regardless of discipline, regardless of subject, so it's not just mathematics. And the analysis shows that Statway students earn approximately 7.7, getting between 7 and 8 college-level units in the 12 months following their completion of Statway, compared to non-Statway students completing in the 12 months completing their Dev Math sequence. In the 12 months after completing their college-level math credit. So, and those students get between 5 and 6. These preliminarily, these results hold network-wide as well as hold for all colleges, except the one that significantly deviated from the Statway program design. Okay, and lastly, we have some early analyses of post-Statway degree completion. Now, as you know, doing an analysis of this kind requires a kind of passage of time, and the pathways, Statway was launched in 2010-11, so we've only just been able to do this. And this particular analysis includes just the first two cohorts, 2011-12 and 2012-13. So these data reflect the percentage of who achieve that particular degree outcome, 2-year degree, 4-year degree, either within 4 or 5 years, depending on the cohort. And as you are probably aware, most of the reports on this have a 6-year completion, report. So what this says is that Statway students in the 2011-12, 2012-13 cohort, 31% of those students who successfully completed Statway completed a 2-year degree by the summer of 2016. By contrast, those students who were not successful in Statway, and of course successful is C or better, the 13% of those students completed that 2-year degree by the summer of 2016 for a total of it's across those students is 22% of students completed a 2-year degree by the summer of 2016. Similarly, the 4-year degree completion rates are 20% for the students who are successful in Statway and 5% for the students who are not successful in Statway. And then we also included here percentage who transferred to 4-year institutions but who have not yet completed the 4-year degree. And those percentages are 14 and 13 respectively for success and non-success. The last row here refers to those students who have, as of summer 2016, not achieved any of those previous 3 completion outcomes. What we don't have here yet are the propensity score matching analyses to look at comparison or even baseline really yet. But for today, we can, look at some national trends just to get a sense of comparison of where these students fall. And I hope you can see this. So I picked this up from CCRC, and CCRC reports that 38.1% of students who started at community colleges in 2009 earned a credential or degree from a 2- or 4-year institution within 6 years. So the comparison there is looking at the first 2 rows of the table. It's the 22% plus the 12%. So Statway students, approximately 34% earned a 2-year or 4-year degree within, as I said, 4 or 5 years, depending on their cohort, as compared to what CCRC reports for the 2009 cohort, about 38% earned a degree from a 2- or 4-year institution within 6 years. One thing to note here is that, of course, Statway students are all students who placed into developmental mathematics, whereas the CCRC data includes all students who started at community college regardless of placement. And then the final bullet here refers to the rate of students. 15% of students who started at those community colleges in 2009 completed a degree at a 4-year institution within 6 years, and that just compares to our second row here, which is 12%. So again, it's close. It's a little bit lower than the national average, but again, our Statway students are all students who placed into developmental mathematics, whereas what CCRC is reporting on are all entering community college students. Okay, so that's all I had for today. I hope I gave you a sense of what we do and some of what we've learned about what is effective, as well as giving you a sense of where we are in terms of our current results and outcomes. Do we have time for questions? Sorry.
Yes, we do have time for questions. First of all, thank you for that presentation. We have one question from Laura Stapleton. She asked, what math ACT level is Statway designed for?
So we haven't done, we decided not to design for specific placement scores because, of course, we are a national effort and placement is radically different in different contexts. Having said that, and I don't have that at the tip of my tongue, some of the faculty in institutions who are in states who use ACT have a sense of what they use, and if you're interested, I could follow up with you on that.
Okay, so I'll have her email you about that.
That would be great.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead and type them in the question box if you have them. I do have a question. Is this something that needs to come from an institution level? It's not something that like an individual instructor could just implement. This is something that requires buy-in from the institution. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, that is correct. The point I was making earlier that this isn't simply a curriculum that is sold. and that really we are a network of folks working together, means that it really is important for the whole institution to sign up and commit. So yes, our model is that 2-year and 4-year institutions join the network. There is a network joining fee. It's a one-time fee. And with that comes all the professional development offerings, all the analytics support, plus opportunities for faculty to engage in multiple different ways, including curriculum revision, assessment work, professional development, if they want to be a faculty coach or a faculty mentor to their peers. There's any number of ways that within the network faculty and administrators can become involved.
All right. We have a question from Robert House. He says, can you tell me ways in which community colleges have successfully implemented the cohort piece of your model?
And this actually goes interestingly to the institutional buy-in. It really takes leadership buy-in. We have seen that when up and down the kind of leadership roster, folks are on board and understand the importance of keeping that cohort together, that they are able to, if necessary, modify faculty assignments and the processes for getting students enrolled in ways that allow for this to happen. And the vast, vast majority of our institutions are able to do this. There are lots and lots of different ways that they do this, depending, of course, on the specific issues that they have to address locally. But again, part of the beauty of being in a network is that almost every single kind of barrier or obstacle that you might have at your local institution, somebody else in the network has addressed. And we can share their learning and put you in touch with folks. This happens all the time, that folks share their solutions to these kinds of challenges.
That's great. I did have one other question myself too. Is this something that can only be done in a face-to-face teaching model? Have you tried any kind of distance learning or online learning models with this?
That's a great question. So we definitely have lots of folks doing hybrid teaching models with the pathways, and that can be anything from meeting several times during the term and conducting synchronous sort of class engagements online to very few synchronous classroom engagements and very few face-to-face engagements. We do, and those different configurations have been quite successful. We do have a few people who are teaching fully online versions of Statway and also Quantway. And it's challenging, no doubt. It's challenging because of the emphasis on collaborative learning, the emphasis on instructional practices that allow students to be able to productively struggle and encourage them to productively struggle on challenging tasks. It's harder to do at a distance. Having said that, we do see some promising practices that some of our faculty are currently engaged in, and we have just convened a working group of faculty led by me and the curriculum lead, Scott Struther, to collectively investigate the research and best practice around online teaching of mathematics for this student population and develop within the next couple years versions that attempt to optimize the sort of socio-emotional and collaborative aspects, even given sort of limited technologies. Stay tuned. We're working on it.
That's great to hear. Thank you. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for presenting this to us today. We really appreciate you taking your time to do this. We don't have any further webinars scheduled in this series yet, but I encourage you all to keep your eyes on your email, and we'll send the announcements out for that as soon as we have them set up. So again, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Anne, for presenting, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.